Sources say the time may be running out for former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin to accept a plea deal.
If he doesn't accept the deal, our sources expect federal prosecutors to ask a grand jury to indict Nagin, possibly as early as tomorrow.
Good morning, I'm Liz Reyes.
And I'm John Snell. Just moments ago, a federal grand jury indicted former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin. This follows a years-long corruption investigation into the former mayor and the awarding of city contracts. There have been 2 guilty pleas that have gotten a lot of attention. This happened just literally within the last minute at federal court. And by the way, the charges we're understanding are conspiracy and depriving the public of the honest services of government. Bribery is at least one of the counts in this case. Filing false income tax returns, another. Read just in federal court a moment ago. Lee Zurich has been in court this morning and has a little more on the indictment now. Lee?
Yeah, John, I'll kind of let you know how the day played out today. The grand jury convened at 9 o'clock and met for a while, heard testimony on this case. Obviously, the grand jury proceedings are private, so we don't know what went on in there. But we do know that 22 grand jurors decided to indict former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin just minutes ago, 2 or 3 minutes ago, in front of the magistrate judge on duty today, Judge Ivan Lamel. Prosecutors read the indictment, and Lamel accepted the indictment. So former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin indicted in federal court today on 21 counts: conspiracy, honest services fraud, bribery, money laundering, and filing a false tax return.
A juror who might have doubts, maybe a reasonable doubt, starts to say, well, wait a minute, there's this guy that says that, and then this guy, and then now there's a third guy, and it sort of becomes everybody against one.
Well, and I think this is, you've seen this a lot, and this is the perfect example of the type of case that they like to get. They like to get a couple of their witnesses lined up that say, yes, I paid him the money for this, and then you line up a lot of other character witnesses, as you will, and certainly Meffert, St. Pierre, Aaron Bennett, all these guys, Frdella's attorney, Randy Smith, said they're on Team USA. His guy, Frank Frdella's on Team USA. So guys in the government's corner. St. Pierre obviously would like to get his sentence reduced some by cooperating. So certainly those guys could, help the government being a character witness, if you will.
And I think these people will, they'll be honest and they'll say, look, I've lied. I may have taken bribes. I may have given the mayor bribes. I did this or that. But this is their chance to tell the truth, because essentially they're helping themselves by telling the truth.
In the meantime, we'll get back to you, but let's go right for the moment to Fox 8 legal analyst Joe Responti, who I guess, Joe, if there was any doubt, we now know who public official A was in all of these documents.
Yes,
as the
sir.
defendants trying to build this case.
They touched all the regular bases. I think they got him on a money laundering, on a tax evasion, and a conspiracy. So this is your straight up indictment, which we all knew was going to come down, and then here we are. I would have to think they've laid it all out to him, as we all knew what was going on, so he certainly did, and he has decided to go forward. So, I mean, I'm a trial guy. He better get ready to go to trial, and let's see how the chips fall. Now, having said that, of course there could come a time where he's going to enter a plea, but we're not at that day yet.
Mayor Mitch Landrieu responded to the news of Ray Nagin's indictment in a statement. He says, quote, "This is a sad day for the city of New Orleans. Today's indictment of former Mayor Ray Nagin alleges serious violations of the public's trust. Public corruption cannot and will not be tolerated." UNO political scientist Ed Shervinack joins us now for a little perspective. So what does this do for our image? And it may not all be bad, right?
It's never good news when your former mayor is indicted by the federal government for corruption, bribery, violating the honest services clause. But at the same time, it shows that regardless of your position of power, you are held accountable to the law, that corruption is just not going to be tolerated anymore in New Orleans.
Well, NOLA.com and Times-Picayune political columnist Jarvis DeBerry joins us now. And Jarvis, this couldn't come at a worse time with all that's about to happen in the city.
Exactly. He came into office in 2002 promising that he was going to run a scandal-free administration, that his was going to be different than the previous administrations. And despite all the finger-pointing he did at the Mark Morial administration and previous inhabitants of City Hall, he's now the first mayor of the city to ever be indicted, and that's a real shame. And it's a really sad day for the city.
Combine Super Bowl crowds with carnival revelers, and what you get is Super Gras. Tonight, thousands of people get a jump start on the fun with live concerts underway along the river and in Metairie. Good evening, I'm John Snell.
And I'm Nancy Parker. No matter where you live, you don't need to go far to find a good time tonight.
Let's get this hour's coverage started with Natasha Robin along the river.
Well, thousands of Super Bowl fans are taking advantage of this free event. The riverfront has been transformed into Super Bowl Boulevard. Take a look at this crowd.
The Rebirth Brass Band set the mood and baggage claim for the Super Bowl experience, waiting for all the people to come into the city.
Commissioner Goodell says he's somewhat intrigued by some of the reception he's gotten while here in New Orleans this week.
The NFL commissioner may be the most welcomed and the most ridiculed man in town.
Picture, as you point out, it's in every restaurant. I had a float in the Mardi Gras parade. We got a voodoo doll. I'm serious, really. Their people here have been incredible.
And good evening, I'm Jessica Holly. It was lights out at the Dome tonight as a power failure delayed the Super Bowl by about a half hour. This is what it looked like from the Fox 8 tower cam. In the third quarter of the game, the majority of the lights failed shortly after Jacoby Jones returned the opening kickoff of the second half for a touchdown.
Just minutes into the third quarter, lights on one side of the Superdome went out. It's the first time the Dome has ever experienced a power outage of this magnitude.
We've spent millions of dollars upgrading our systems in that facility, including our electrical feeder system.
I do not think this will have an impact on future Super Bowls here in New Orleans. I fully expect we'll be back here for Super Bowls.
Why do you take cash withdrawals from public credit card? Why won't you answer our questions? These are legitimate questions. You're a public official. You spend public money, sir.
Deshari charged $2,000 for limousines in New York City.
Can you tell us about the limousine in New York? Was that for a public purpose?
How is that not a conflict for you? Are your campaign contributions help, in a sense, buying legislation that's favorable to the nursing homes?
No, I don't think so.
The commissioner stuck to the official data, even when we showed him a video of different people explaining how long they waited. He watched and listened to people like Ariana Marabani, who was there to take her permit test.
Do you have the ticket that shows when you got here?
Yes. 11:54 a.m.
She waited until the office closed after 4:30, and she was never seen.
You saw some of the people we spoke with, and they have longer times than listed on this sheet.
Say they do.
Right, they say they do.
I don't want to call anybody a liar, but there's no, this is the best system that we have.
A system that may not represent these stories.
I had one number and they put me out. I was next, the next number, and they put me out. That is God awful.
That did occur. It most assuredly occurred, and I apologize if any viewer thought that I was trying to cover up something. I certainly wasn't. We had asked the day before the interview and were told by the manager that that was not going on.
We found 9 officials who appear to have violated that law, giving some an unfair financial advantage in elections. Facebook photos detailed luxurious trips overseas. Those postings could have helped lead to today's charges that will send Dr. Peter Galvin to federal prison. The feds charge Galvin with conspiracy to commit theft of property and money. The bulk of the money Galvin allegedly stole, $111,000 of unused vacation and sick leave he cashed out. Our stories show those luxurious vacations, but also an office policy that clearly stated Galvin couldn't be paid the money. Today, the feds say Galvin conspired to pay himself the money against his office policy. Our stories also focused on a contract with the city of Slidell. It's a contract Galvin had personally as a medical doctor and not through the coroner's office. We showed how Galvin never went to the jail but sent his chief death investigator, Mark Lombard. We questioned whether Galvin was using a public resource, in this case, the employee Lombard, to work on a private contract. The feds answered that question, charging Galvin, saying the loss to the coroner's office was $50,000. The feds also allege Galvin used office funds to buy a marine generator, a life raft, and flotation devices for his personal boat. And finally, the feds charged Galvin for putting $15,000 on his public credit card, meals and personal items Galvin claimed were for the office, but the feds say were in fact for himself. Fox 8 detailed many of those charges in our second story in the corner. For example, we showed pricey meals at Antoine's in La Provence. The feds charged Galvin in a bill of information instead of an indictment. That's important to note because most of the time defendants charged in a bill of information have reached a plea deal and intend to plead guilty. We may find that out next week when Galvin makes his first appearance in federal court. In late October, Galvin pleaded guilty in federal court. When federal judge Susie Morgan asked Galvin, "Are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty?" Galvin responded, "Yes, I am." Two other members of Galvin's office were named in those charges. Mark Lombard, the chief death investigator, and CFO Kim Kelly were both called co-conspirators. They have not been charged yet, but sources say that could be coming. We tried several times during our series and were never able to get Galvin to answer questions. We went to his house and office, but could never track him down in public. And even at the federal courthouse, Galvin remained silent as he left. And he'll be back at the federal courthouse next month. Dr. Peter Galvin will be sentenced to time in federal prison on January 29th. In the state of Louisiana, this lakefront neighborhood isn't a blip on the map. There's one home, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All totaled, 398, 399. It's a neighborhood the size of some Mardi Gras cruise. We counted about 400 homes in this neighborhood.
That's correct.
But imagine a community this small.
But that's a lot of money to be giving.
With the power to pour tens of millions of dollars.
It's incredible, these numbers I'm looking at.
Into politicians' war chests. If your home were able to contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars to campaigns, $1 million, what do you think you'd be getting?
I'm sure I would be getting, I'd be getting a speaking voice, so to speak, if you want to call it that. They would be listening to me. Influence.
This Kenner community helps illustrate just how few people in the state influence taxpayer money, laws, politicians, and elections. For nearly 4 months, Fox 8 News and NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, spent hundreds of research hours crunching campaign data to come up with the top 400 donors to Louisiana elections over the past 4 years. The top 400 is a record of people with the money to influence, and some have used that money to help reform government, bring stronger laws, and transparency. This small group actually represents a sliver, 0.3% of all donors. But they give big bucks, nearly 1/3 of all money donated to Louisiana's politicians. If you were able to give $500,000, $1 million to politicians, what would you expect?
I would expect them to vote the way I'd like to see the votes being done.
And according to the National Institute of Money on State Politics, that's the problem with a small group giving large amounts of money.
I think it's indicative of a less healthy democratic process because too few players are having too large of a role.
The law allows individuals and corporations to give up to $5,000 to major races like governor or the mayor of New Orleans. Donations are lower, $2,500 for other offices like state senators and representatives. Several industries stuck out in our research: oil and gas, utilities, banking, insurance, and millions from attorneys. But some of the top 400 may surprise Baton Rouge outsiders. 3 different river pilot groups made the top 35, and nursing homes gave big bucks. 10 different nursing homes made the top 400. All total, that industry donated more than $2 million. Bruce Blaney spent 6 years in the State Department of Health and Hospitals. Now he's an advocate for the elderly getting care in their homes. He says money should follow the patient, not an empty bed, but says it all comes down to money.
How does that happen?
Well, you can buy policy, alas. I mean, these campaign contributions buy a policy. They bought the empty bed policy.
You believe that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know it.
To know just how big of a business nursing homes are around the state, All you need to do is look at this stack of paper. 4 years of campaign contributions. The industry's come a long way from 1992, when Buddy Roemer left the governor's mansion.
This is nursing home in the last couple years.
Awesome. Well, it's exploded. I guess their dependence on the governor and the legislature is at an all-time high.
Senator John Alario hasn't faced an opponent since 2007, but that hasn't stopped him from spending $500,000 of campaign money. In the past 4 years, the Senate president has spent $508,000 from his campaign war chest. Keep in mind, our story Tuesday night showed Alario may have broken that PAC limit law 3 straight elections, collecting a total of almost $100,000 more than the legal limit. Here's what Alario's been spending that money on. Much of it tickets to LSU, Saints, and Hornets games, and also to the Jazz Fest and Mahalia Jackson Theater. All totaled, in the past 4 years, Alario spent almost $60,000 on tickets, all from his campaign.
I fell next to a lady. I fell right next to her. And she was shot. Her arm looked so bad.
Ed Buckner still can't believe what he witnessed Sunday afternoon. Buckner was leading the original Big 7 second line parade to celebrate Mother's Day when police say 3 gunmen opened fire on a group of some 300 people parading in the streets.
And Mayor Mitch Landrieu stopped his own Mother's Day celebration and showed up here at the city's Level 1 Trauma Center, where most of the victims ended up. Of course, it is Mother's Day, a day when mothers are supposed to be joyous and celebrating. But tonight, some mothers in this city are injured and others are hurting inside.
Mothers that were shot, sisters that were shot. We have little children that were shot.
Chief Ronald Surpass makes a plea to the public, asking for any information that can find the person or persons responsible for hurting 19 people in yesterday's Mother's Day second line in the 7th Ward. Good afternoon, I'm Nancy Parker.
And I'm Kim Holden. Over the next 2 hours, we'll bring you live team coverage of the Mother's Day shooting fallout.
Chief Surpass wrapped up his news conference about an hour ago. He seemed confident that they would be making an arrest soon.
Like the song actually go, dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. We've actually played that and then looked up, whole crowd, and guns and bullets and concrete flying.
Investigators say people hold the key to catching the alleged gunman in the Mother's Day shooting, and they warn of the consequences for anyone hiding him.
We know who did this. We know his name. We know what he looks like. And you know what? Somebody knows where he is.
NOPD Chief Ronald Surpass says 19-year-old Akeen Scott is involved with gang activity around the Frenchman Street area.
10-year-old Kennard Allen, emotionless on his porch, his face marked by violence.
He's upset, angry, he don't want to talk to nobody.
He's one of the youngest victims to be hit by a bullet on Mother's Day.
I'm fed up with it.
Last year, Kennard celebrated his 10th birthday party outside his grandmother's house on Simon Boulevard when gunfire rang out. Bullets pierced his leg and neck. His cousin, 5-year-old Brianna Allen, didn't make it. Back then, he told me what happened.
At first, we thought that was a balloon popping. And when they popped out and seen everybody running, it was a gunshot.
Now, after a 3rd bullet in less than a year. Tell me what you want to tell the people who did this. Silence. Violence taking its toll.
6 people are now in custody facing charges in connection with Sunday's shooting during a second line parade.
We have team coverage over the next 2 hours, including how police found the suspects and fears of retaliation in the 7th Ward.
The appearance came just 12 hours after his arrest in Little Woods after a large manhunt involving the NOPD, FBI, and the U.S. Marshals Service. Akeen Woods now been charged with 20 counts of attempted murder, charges which could be raised if any of the 3 victims still in critical condition get worse. Police said they were looking for more suspects, and today we learned they had arrested 5 more people, including Akeen Scott's 24-year-old brother, Sean.
Hundreds of people paraded through the 7th Ward today on a mission. This time around, no violence when they got to the intersection of Frenchman and Villeray. Members of the original Big 7 Social Aid and Pleasure Club decided to host a second line again, this time with increased police presence. As the second line marched past Frenchman and Villeray today, music filled the air.
This is a great day for New Orleans to talk about the spirit of New Orleans.
The timestamp in the video helps Deb Cotton remember.
I'd forgotten I even shot it.
The video from Mother's Day.
The weather was beautiful. It was a little bit overcast, but it was cool and manageable.
A second line celebration in the 7th Ward.
It was not long after this. I looked over for no reason in particular, and I saw a guy, I don't know, maybe 20 feet ahead of me with a gun. And it was so surreal. It almost looks like he was moving to the beat. Like it was one of those moments that, like, it becomes surreal. You don't believe what you're seeing. And it was kind of in slow motion. And I was trying to scream to, my friends, he's got a gun, he's shooting. But it just came, it felt like it was coming out slow. And we all started running, and I thought I was gonna make it.
Tension and raw emotion filled the room as Coakley begged for forgiveness from a family his actions shattered. 29-year-old Josh Coakley walks into an office building on what he calls one of the toughest days of his life. He'll meet the family of Wendell Allen, a man he killed more than a year ago. Wendell Allen's family waited in another room down the hall.
I'm just trying to see what he have to say, that's it. No emotions.
My client and my friend, Josh Coakley.
How you doing?
He has something to hand you also. Today may be kind of a blur, but he just wanted a lasting thing that you could have and read after the blur. But he's been waiting for this, and he just, from the bottom of his heart, wants to apologize to you personally. Glad we finally got to sit down. I've been wanting to tell you for a very long time how sorry I am.
I want to get a live update now on that double shooting on the Crescent City Connection Bridge that has left a man and a baby dead tonight.
We know that shortly after 9:30 tonight, the first calls started coming over the scanner of shots fired on the CCC, and then it turned out we were at the foot of the bridge where this incident occurred. Again, a man shot dead inside of a car, and an infant baby boy who was taken to the hospital but sadly passed away. And I just want to mention quickly that a woman just showed up here a few minutes ago, presumably a family member. She's being comforted right now by the NOPD. I believe she was just informed that these were her loved ones involved. Just a horrible situation, very tragic situation out here right now. We're going to have much more on this story as it develops. Back to you.
They're standing in solidarity against ongoing violence, while also mourning the loss of 11-year-old Arabian Gales in front of the very home where she was shot to death early yesterday morning.
We thank you that this thing is turning around even now.
Yes, God.
That somebody's going to come forward
yes, God.
and give them what they need to catch those responsible. We pray in your name, Jesus.
A large crowd gathered tonight in the 1300 block of General Ogden, many of them placing stuffed animals and messages on the porch of Gail's family's home.
People from other communities, total strangers, coming by, stopping by this residence, this apartment complex, and dropping off teddy bears and candles, a sort of memorial to remember 6-year-old Aledia North.
That's right. Emotions ran very high in Central City tonight as the community rallied around loved ones of London Samuels, while also calling on everyone to stand up and take their neighborhoods and really this entire city back from the violent criminals. Tonight, a large crowd gathered to remember London Samuels and to call on people across the city to do their part to end the bloodshed.
A son, Kevin, 5-year-old Margaret, and a baby daughter, Kathleen, left the family home here in Ireland in 1818.
Last year's lottery luck does not hold up for the New Orleans Pelicans.
But they did refer us to the White House Office of Management and Budget, but we never received a response to our interview request.
Each hour, this pipe pumps out 3,600 cubic yards of material.
or 200 dump trucks of new Louisiana.
Though I still let dive coordinator Desiree Bell jump in first. In just a few seconds, we had the best view in the house.
Now you go under.
He choreographed this scene. Man attacks newscaster.
So hey, lady, I can do this to you.
You don't want to
Come here.
Strapped into the simulated helicopter, we brace for a crash, taking deep breaths up until the last moment.
Thumbs up, we're good to go. Divers clear? Hitch me straight in. All right, nice deep breath, here we go.
A final gasp of air, and the water rushes over our heads, pressure making it much harder to open the door. Watch again. You see we open our exit first, then hold on to the door frame to stay oriented, and then undo the seatbelt. In my head, I'm constantly repeating exit frame seatbelt. The escape must be in that order.
The fight to save the coast is a mom and apple pie issue in South Louisiana. It enjoys virtually universal support. On the surface, dig a little deeper and you'll find deep divisions among scientists and engineers and many fishermen over how to go about it. They are wrestling over mud.
That's it. That's what you got.
Charter boat captain George Riggs shows us a dying marsh. With little effort, he yanks weak grass out of the earth.
We're on land now. Watch. It's not rooted at all.
The rapid land loss in St. Bernard Parish confuses his boat's GPS device.
The map says we're sitting on land as we speak.
Instead, we're in a couple feet of water in a bay that seems to stretch wider by the month. Riggs blames the Carnarvon Freshwater Diversion Project on the Plaquemine-St. Bernard Parish line. If Carnarvon's a straw, one diversion planned nearby would be a fire hose. 250,000 cubic feet per second, or approaching the size of the Bonnie Carey spillway. Supporters argue the only way to restore coastal Louisiana is to mimic what built it in the first place, America's great river. When man put the mighty river in a straitjacket of levees, he robbed the marsh of the Mississippi's land-building powers.
If we want there to be any land here in 50 or 100 years, we've got to change the way the system works.
It doesn't surprise me that we're hearing some second guessing and some concerns. In some ways, that's evidence that something may actually be about to happen.
The vast majority of scientists and coastal activists buy into the argument that we must use the river, and they warn time is not on our side.
The only shot we really have is to create new land, and you can't create new land without using the resources that the river brings to us.
We see like these little scar marks, for example, throughout the region.
But Dr. Pat Fitzpatrick, a meteorologist and coastal researcher, argues for a combination of smaller diversions and dredging, pumping sediment to build new land. He points to satellite images of Breton Sound before Katrina and after. Fitzpatrick believes the existing smaller diversion converted some marsh to a freshwater system unable to withstand a giant surge of salt.
The area near the diversion, the marshland, is no longer resilient to hurricane storm surge. And the reason for that is because the root system is very shallow and weak.
Critics say this is not Mark Twain's river. A study by the prominent Woods Hole Institution cautioned fertilizers in the modern river, nitrates and phosphates, begin destroying freshwater marsh after about 5 years.
Folk artist Hank Holland is earning an international following after just 5 years of painting. His scenes of life on the bayou now hang in all 50 states, 106 countries, and the Vatican. The Smithsonian is now also in discussions with Holland to display a few pieces. But Holland's handiwork is really just the window dressing to a stunning life story.
Hank Holland's paintings are a blend of his memories, the good and the bad, the lessons learned the hard way, the triumphs and defeats. Every stroke is strengthened by love, plus the patience and determination Holland learned from those who came before him.
Here's an old tailgate that somebody gave me off a 1941 Chevrolet. This is my Bayou tailgate. Tailgate Bayou style.
Juke joints and hoodats adorn this painting. Swamp life pops out of other works. This one, entitled Nola Love, features New Orleans' skyline rising up from a piano's keys. It pays tribute to musical legends Jelly Roll Morton, Louis Armstrong, and Dr. John. One of Holland's most popular series is called The Treehouse.
When I was growing up as a young boy, the kids gave me a hard time because of my disability. So my dad built me a treehouse.
Hank Holland was born with cerebral palsy. Growing up, other children taunted Holland because of his awkward walk, ostracized him because of his slurred speech. The treehouse Holland's father built him served as his escape from all the bullying, a safe haven where he came to terms with his unique challenges.
It's where I found my belonging in life, and I began to understand my disability.
Understanding cerebral palsy didn't mean giving up. Accepting CP actually helped Holland learn to live life to the fullest.
When you're born with a disability, you get so many strikes against you to begin with. I mean, you got to constantly prove yourself or work harder to get to where you want to get at.
In 2003, Holland was working as an environmental auditor when he decided to volunteer at United Cerebral Palsy of New Orleans. That's where he met Loyola graduate Maria Hernandez, who was working at the nonprofit in marketing despite also battling CP. Things moved fast.
You met in August and you proposed at the end of September?
I told you I was smitten. I was in love.
The couple married in September 2004 and began wrestling with whether to have a baby. Maria had long dreamed of a family, but had concerns about whether she could be a good mother.
God told me, look, it's not your decision. If you have a baby, I'm going to be here every step of the way to help you.
In November 2004, the Hollands began trying. 1 month later, they discovered they'd been successful. Christian Holland came early, August 2005, just ahead of Hurricane Katrina. Despite the premature birth, the storm, and the doubts swirling in Maria's mind, she was a natural at motherhood.
Everything that I worried about when I was planning, how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do, what if I drop him, what if...
Never had a problem.
Never had a problem.
It never happened.
Never.
Today, Christian is the picture of health. A 7-year-old second grader whose favorite subject is science.
Try it again.
Thanks to hours spent scrimmaging with his dad, Christian can school you on the basketball court.
Doing all kinds of tricks and dribbling.
That is, when he's not on the baseball diamond.
I like baseball a lot because whenever you pitch the ball really hard, the ball goes like really far. That's what I like about it.
Becoming a dad, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was scary, mainly because I wanted to pattern myself after my father, who was a good man. And he wasn't alive when Christian was born.
Holland summoned the memories of his father for inspiration in raising Christian and in dealing with the scorn he and Maria face from others.
You get a lot of looks in public. Like, what are you doing with him? What do you know? Well, who are you to have a child? Can you take care of that child? It's always hurtful. It's always, I want to scream. I get so mad sometimes.
The Hollands overcome through prayer and the philosophy that they should never let someone else steal the day's joy. They rely on
God, faith,
and trust.
And you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
You got to believe in who you are.
Faith and love are common themes in Holland's paintings. He often incorporates the principles he lives by. And there are nods to his favorite Bible verses, too. Holland always signs his paintings with an upside-down signature because, as he says, he's a little different. Then he always adds a cross.
Because I didn't paint that by myself. God and I painted that together. And we have a good time doing it.
There's someone else who Holland credits with guiding his artistic hand, his mother Jane. She was a painter her entire life. Holland grew up watching, but never picked up a brush. Then 5 years ago, after Jane died, Holland was missing her so desperately, he tried painting simply to feel closer to her.
Every time I paint, I feel like my mom's sitting on the table or sitting on the side of me, saying, you know, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or Hank, you need to take a break.
Holland's paintings now number more than 8,000. He paints 8 to 10 hours every day.
I've taught myself. I've never had a lesson at all. So I feel like sometimes when I get stuck with something, I'll holler at Mom, okay, Mom, I can't figure this out. Help me out here.
It's working, even though Holland has no professional training. Galleries like Mosaic Garden in Baton Rouge have a hard time keeping his work in stock.
People will stand here and just look at his paintings for hours.
Art gallery owner Pam Steinzik has 18 years of experience in collecting and selling art. When she saw Hank's paintings for the first time, they touched her.
When I talk about him, I get chills in my arms. He gets you right up front, and you can't help but fall in love with one of his paintings. He uses a lot of perspective, and he has action in his little figures.
Steinzik says she'd classify Holland's work with the top folk artists in Louisiana, Clementine Hunter and William Hemmerline.
I sure would. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Steinzik's favorite piece? Hank's reverse painting done on glass.
Anything that he would paint last has to come first. The stars on the flag here.
The end result is a glowing piece that looks illuminated. It's a difficult technique requiring precise planning and vision.
The last thing he does is the water, the grass, and the sky. That's last. And normally when you're painting, that would be the first thing you lay on your canvas, and then you build your painting from there. He's amazing. He's an awesome artist.
I don't want to buy your art, but I want to meet you.
Holland's art is developing a cult-like following. Many just appear on Holland's Lockport doorstep, looking to purchase a piece.
We're going to have to build another house just to hang your art. Our house could be your gallery.
Yeah.
Robert Winter travels to Holland's home periodically.
Piece number 8.
Piece number 8. They got 8 pieces. So they drove down from Covington, one of my collectors.
After years of enduring the shuns and the rejection, Hank describes every sale as a humbling experience, an honor that someone wants to bring a piece of him into their home.
Now here's our first stop in New Orleans. This is a Superdome coming up, and well, that's just a news van going by there.
For generations, WVUE has been going places, chronicling life in New Orleans and beyond.
In Mexico City, we're the 3rd station in Louisiana.
Highly regarded journalists who helped build the station made their mark here. We celebrate WVUE's 60th anniversary.
This is a Fox 8 special, the Endymion Extravaganza 2013, live from the Mercedes-Benz Superdome.
This parade tonight is going to be one that looks at so many beautiful mysteries that we have over the years, and more than 15,000 people will pack this Superdome tonight for this mega party.
We have got it all covered for you. Lee Zurich and Kim Holden are in the thick of the crowds in Mid-City. Natasha Robin is on a float to give us an idea of what it's like to actually ride in Endymion. Jerry Valancourt and Liz Reyes have crowds covered outside Gallier Hall.
And inside the dome, we have Fred Hickman, Shelley Brown, Meg Gatto, Chris Franklin, and Susan Isaacs.
It has been an amazing ride so far. We left right at 4 o'clock this afternoon to crowds in some cases, 30 people deep. Right now we're on Canal Street. We just passed Bourbon, and take a look at these crowds. It is absolutely amazing out here.
You're watching live coverage of Mardi Gras 2013 on Fox 8.
The Zulu Warriors.
These guys are incredible.
I want to know this pace up the whole time?
Oh, no indeed, man. Happy Mardi Gras, you guys. I love y'all.
Pretty sure we're not going to see anybody in costume quite like ours.
Twitter bird, Kim Holden. Follow her on Twitter, please. Let me cover your face. Follow Kim on Twitter.
How about this? $1,056,495 raised here for the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
From Louisiana's home team, this is Fox 8 News at 9 p.m.
City has not had an indicted mayor.
January 18th, 2013, one for the history books, as prosecutors land an indictment against Ray Nagin.
I think everybody saw this coming.
Well, not everybody. Nagin's lawyer says he was still in negotiations with the government over a possible plea deal.
We were going to speak, I guess, next week before anything happened.
A federal grand jury hits the former New Orleans mayor with a 21-count indictment, piling on charges of bribery and conspiracy that could send Nagin to prison for years.
How you doing, guys?
A newcomer in 2002, Nagin swept into office as a reformer, a businessman who would root out corruption and usher in a new era of prosperity.
If you're going to give me a campaign contribution and you're expecting a contract, you're wasting your money.
In fact, there's no sign that ever happened. Rather, the feds accused Nagin of pocketing tens of thousands of dollars for himself and doling out millions in contracts. The Nagin camp maintains he's innocent.
Our position is that he did nothing improper.
A trial would pit Ray Nagin against a team of confessed conspirators singing to the feds about his alleged wrongdoings.
Good evening, I'm John Snell. And I'm Lee Zurich. The feds come out swinging against former Mayor Ray Nagin in a 21-count indictment. Prosecutors accuse Nagin of accepting payoffs, free trips, and other arrangements.
Today's indictment charges him with conspiracy, depriving the public of honest services, 6 counts of bribery. Charges alone that, if convicted, could have Nagin facing years in prison, as we'll show you in a few minutes, and have him paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. Prosecutors also accused Nagin of filing false income tax returns, money laundering, and wire fraud, which hold some of the toughest punishments. As we bring you 90 minutes of expanded coverage tonight, we start with Ray Nagin's attorney maintaining his client is innocent.
Yeah, Robert Jenkins says he was surprised by today's indictment, but Nagin will fight the charges against him. Meg Gatto has the story.
Robert Jenkins says he's been in talks with prosecutors for quite some time about the case they've been building against Ray Nagin. Both sides had another meeting scheduled, so Jenkins was caught off guard when a federal grand jury indicted the former mayor this morning.
We had some conversation with the government that we were going to speak, I guess, next week before anything happened. And what happened today was totally a surprise in terms of an indictment.
Fox 8 legal analyst Joe Brisponti says he finds that hard to believe.
Everybody around town was talking about it coming, the next couple of days, so I know Robert had to have some thought about that, so I really don't get that.
Nevertheless, Jenkins says he and Nagin will proceed to trial, although he's not totally ruling out the idea of a plea deal. In fact, Jenkins thinks the government will use Nagin's 2 sons to try to get him to sign a deal.
There's always been this indication about whether or not the children or sons were going to be indicted. So at this point, they're not. And of course, that's going to be something that the government will probably say, look, we didn't indict them, will you come in?
As for the evidence laid out in the indictment that former business associates allegedly gave Nagin bribes, Jenkins says, consider the source.
Well, you have to look at what they're getting out of it.
Jenkins says Nagin feels confident that his name will be cleared.
He was in good spirits. He said, I did nothing wrong, and I'm going to defend myself.
Meg Gatto, Fox 8 News.
Jenkins says he still plans on speaking with the government in the near future about the case, but in the meantime, he's well prepared and will continue to gather evidence in anticipation of a trial.
While Nagin won't likely serve the full time if convicted on the charges, here's a look at the punishment each charge carries. Count 1, conspiracy to commit bribery and honest services wire fraud, holds a maximum 5 years in prison, a $250,000 fine. Counts 2 through 7, the bribery charges, each of them carry 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. On wire fraud, counts 8 through 16, those hold actually the largest penalties, a maximum 20 years in prison, as well as $250,000 fine. Count 17, money laundering conspiracy, Nagin faces up to 10 years and a $250,000 fine. And then finally on counts 18 through 21, dealing with filing false tax returns, allegedly, each count holds a maximum 3 years in prison and a $100,000 fine.
Our sources were fairly certain a significant development in this case would come this week. Those sources thought the sides would reach a plea deal, expected it to come Monday and then possibly later in the week. But Nagin would never agree to the Fed's terms, so today they turned to a federal grand jury, which handed up a 21-count indictment. Ray Nagin ran across these men during his time as mayor of New Orleans. He traveled with some, had meals, even considered at least one a friend. These same men could put the former New Orleans mayor in federal prison, possibly for more than a decade, if a federal jury finds Nagin guilty. A federal grand jury handed up a 21-count indictment. A unanimous 22 grand jurors said prosecutors showed them enough evidence to indict, hitting Nagin with 1 count of conspiracy, 6 counts of bribery, 9 counts of honest services wire fraud, 1 count of money laundering conspiracy, and 4 counts of income tax evasion. The indictment is lengthy, 25 pages, but to sum it up, the feds allege Nagin used the power of his office, the powers of awarding contracts, and giving favorable treatment. In return, prosecutors say these men gave Nagin bribes and kickbacks by check, cash, granite, wire transfers, personal services, and free travel. If this case goes to trial, the 2 most significant witnesses will be former city vendors Frank Ferdella and Rodney Williams. Both have pleaded guilty in federal court. Prosecutors say Ferdella gave Nagin $50,000 while Nagin was still mayor and hired him as a consultant once Nagin left office, paying him an additional $112,000. Ferdella also says he gave Nagin free granite for Stone Age LLC, the granite company Nagin formed with his 2 sons. In return, prosecutors say Ferdella received favorable treatment. He was awarded 3 contracts during Nagin's term in office. Rodney Williams and his company, Threefold Consultants, also were awarded lucrative contracts during Nagin's term. Williams says he paid Nagin $60,000. Nagin also allegedly received free travel from city vendors Mark St. Pierre and Aaron Bennett. They allegedly paid for him to go to Jamaica, Las Vegas, Chicago, and Hawaii. Nagin also received a $23,000 trip to New York City by an unknown businessman. The government says in return, Nagin waived past due taxes the businessman owed. The indictment doesn't reveal the businessman, but says he owned a theater in New Orleans East. And the government says Nagin failed to pay $500,000 in income taxes, falsely reporting his returns from 2005 to 2008. In the indictment, the government makes its case for a conspiracy by showing how Nagin tried to hide meetings with some of the co-conspirators mentioned in the indictment. Back in 2009, I requested Nagin's calendar and emails from 2008, the time period he received many of the alleged payments from the city vendors. He refused to hand over the calendar and emails. I sued. He tried to hand over a version of the calendar where most of his meetings were blacked out. The indictment says in February of 2009, Nagin produced a redacted version of his appointment calendar in response to that public records request, which concealed his relationship with the co-conspirators. If this case goes to trial, many of the men Nagin came to know during his 8 years in office, the co-conspirators, some of which he tried to hide from the public, could help send him to federal prison for improperly being given money, granite, and free trips during his term as mayor. Nagin's kids are referenced in the indictment but have not been charged with any crime. Nagin owned the granite company Stone Age LLC with his 2 sons, Jeremy and Jaron.
Interim U.S. Attorney Dana Bente commented on the grand jury decision only through a statement today and said that this office will continue its history of investigating and prosecuting public corruption. He says this is an important part of the office's mission to serve the citizens of the Eastern District of Louisiana and make certain they have honest public officials. When Nagin first became mayor, he vowed to crack down on corruption.
His popularity was at an all-time high, but in the years after Katrina, Nagin's support fell dramatically. It all happened around the same time. He's accused of using the office for his own personal gain. Natasha Robin has the stories.
He was a breath of fresh air. as a candidate, for him to come out of nowhere the way that he did.
More than a decade ago, Ray Nagin ran for mayor on a platform to root out corruption in a city that seemed plagued by it.
And he charmed us all. I mean, he really, really charmed the city, won overwhelmingly against a very popular police chief, Richard Pennington, who was everybody's favorite going into that election season.
Before becoming mayor, Nagin was an executive of Cox and had no political experience.
He just came in as kind of a breath of fresh air, that he wasn't a traditional politico. He was going to come to City Hall and he was going to reform it. He was going to bring business practices into City Hall and move the city in a new direction.
Towards the end of his first term as mayor, the city faced the unthinkable when Hurricane Katrina hit. It put Mayor Ray Nagin front and center.
People felt that he understood their pain. Whether he did really or not is up for debate.
This city will be chocolate at the end of the day.
Now he's front and center in front of not just the national media, but global media. And so he was representing our city at that time to the world. One of his issues was the right to return, and that resonated with the African American community, and so they rallied around him and helped re-elect him in 2006.
The facts are we will be rebuilding.
After re-election, frustration grew among communities struggling to return.
My family will be in a hotel to be displaced after you said I'm holding you responsible to come back.
Many blamed the lack of progress on the administration.
I think most of the people felt a real disappointment, even the people who voted for him. I got that second time, I got the impression that they felt, wow, he told us he was going to do all these things and didn't seem to really put himself into doing it.
I remember when I was analyzing his calendar, and what really struck me was just the lack of any kind of commitment to leading the city or managing the city.
UNO political scientist Ed Chervenak says there were few meetings scheduled, and it consisted mostly of speeches and ceremonies.
Here was his opportunity to shine, and he just completely dropped the ball and just basically went into a shell. And as a result, I mean, by the time he left office, he was at 24% job approval rating. And so, you're at that point, he was probably the most unpopular and most reviled public official in America when he left office.
I wish that he had just decided to step aside. I mean, we all wish that now, given that he's the first mayor in the history of the city to be indicted.
Nagin is being accused of lining his pockets with bribe money and payoffs between December of 2004 till present. Most of what he's accused of allegedly took place in 2007.
His legacy is one of being probably the most incompetent mayor in New Orleans' modern history. And if he's found guilty, then not only will he have an incompetent administration, but it will be noted as a corrupt administration as well.
Ed Chervenak calls this a sad day for the city. He also says the indictment will send a message to others in office and candidates in the future that corruption is no longer tolerated in New Orleans. Lee?
All right, reaction from the public ranges from disgust and anger to sorrow and disappointment.
Yeah, shoppers outside a Mid-City grocery store actually lined up in the parking lot to sound off when we arrived there tonight to find out what people think.
To be really truthful with you, I think most of the politicians in Louisiana are corrupt, and he just bought into the whole situation.
Chief Pennington, that's who I voted for in the beginning. If we'd have gotten him, he was cleaning up crime, and he would have gotten this city straight as a mayor. That's the way I feel about it.
Kind of mixed emotions on that, but you reap what you sow, and I tell you, that's from what was going on, after the hurricane and everything, I really felt that he let the city down.
Somebody comes in, you think that they have the goods to do the job, and then it turns out just another crook.
Just got caught in the system. He got caught probably, the money thing, money rule all evil. So I guess that what happened, We all fall short sometimes.
The only direct comment so far from Ray Nagin today came from his Twitter page. This morning he retweeted a Joe Olstein comment that reads, "You are closest to your victory when you face the greatest opposition." Osteen is a pastor with a large following. His mega church is based in the Houston area. Nagin has a home in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And to clarify, that tweet actually came out a couple hours before the indictment. So you had a sense at the time of, okay, he sees it coming, and they said, in fact, they thought they were in a negotiation and did not see it coming.
The timing was almost surreal, too, because I was at the federal courthouse, and literally the prosecutors who are handling this case walk in the federal courthouse literally almost at the same time that Nagin actually sent that tweet on Twitter. So interesting timing there at federal court today. All right, the Coast Guard works to remove a sunken tugboat in the Mississippi River. The challenges they're facing ahead.
Well, let's not convict him before he goes before trial, because innocent until proven guilty.
And a former council member who served with Ray Nagin talks about today's indictment and what it could mean for the city.
Mayor Mitch Langer responded to the news of Ray Nagin's indictment in a statement.
He says, quote, "This is a sad day for the city of New Orleans. Today's indictment of former Mayor Ray Nagin alleges serious violations of the public's trust. The mayor says that public corruption cannot and will not be tolerated."
Public opinion seems mixed as to whether today's indictment will cause long-lasting damage to New Orleans' image. Sabrina Wilson continues our coverage.
As a two-term mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin served with various council members. One of them was Jay Batt.
I think it's sad for our city and Black Eye, and we're going to be the brunt of a lot of jokes for, you know, the corruption that we've had in the city and state for quite some time.
Still, Batt, who is no longer on the city council, hopes the city's image won't be battered nationally over the developments at federal court.
People recognize that all the people in this community are working really hard to make it a better place, and unfortunately we have some slips like this, but, you know, hopefully we won't see any more in the future.
On the streets of the city, the word of Nagin's legal problems spread fast.
Yes, I was shocked. I mean, I'm not really surprised with all the stuff that was going around and, you know, all the information that they had given us before. I mean, it's not really a surprise.
I think everybody expected it. You know, we've heard about it on national news, and I think everybody saw this coming.
And even though Nagin's future is uncertain given the serious charges he faces, people we spoke to believe the city will survive the negative headlines and move forward.
I think we're going to be able to move on. I think it's a positive thing that, you know, there's no more supposition and we'll be able to move on.
I'm just being prayerful right now for him and his family. Yeah, the city of New Orleans.
Let's not convict him before he goes before trial, because innocent until proven guilty, but the feds never bring about these kind of indictments unless they got everything locked up.
And soon the former mayor will stand before a judge to answer the charges contained in the indictment. I'm Sabrina Wilson, Fox 8 News.
Michael Anderson, special agent in charge of the FBI's New Orleans field office, says this indictment should serve as a reminder to current and former public officials that in the interest of full accountability, the FBI pursues corruption even after an official leaves office.
One historian says Ray Nagin will make history as the only New Orleans mayor indicted in modern times.
The closest was in 1894. John Fitzpatrick was impeached. His impeachment led to a trial, but the trial exonerated him from all charges.
Tulane historian Terrence Fitzmaurice says that Nagin supporters voted for him because they hoped that he would be an improvement over his predecessors. His business experience set him apart. But Fitzmaurice says that Nagin's confidence in his own ability and indifference to public opinion may have led him to believe he was invincible.
Ray Nagin, I think, has a quality about him that is flamboyant and buccaneering almost. And so he probably felt comfortable traveling in circles where his power and authority could be used on a personal basis. And certainly mayors across the country, not just in New Orleans, have a certain powerful presence about them, that they can use personal power or constituted power as if it's personal. And that's his downfall. It's not his personal power, it belongs to the people of the city of New Orleans, and he betrayed that if these indictments are true.
Fitzmaurice says that history will also judge Nagin for his reaction after Katrina and the loss of control that he had in a crisis.
At this point, Ray Nagin must appear in federal court in New Orleans at the end of the month. His arraignment is set for January 31st, 2 in the afternoon. He's scheduled to appear before Judge Ginger Berrigan. We've made it easy for you to read the entire indictment against Nagin. We've posted it for you on fox8live.com. You can also view our past investigations leading up to today's charges.
More coming up later, but after all that, you might be ready for a little break. So Super Bowl is a little over 2 weeks away. We'll show you how crews turn downtown buildings into Super Bowl billboards in a flash.
And a victory for those who protested body scanners, while the company will soon pull the controversial machines from airports.
From Louisiana's home team, this is Fox 8 News at 9 p.m.
Controversial airport scanners will disappear in a few months after complaints of images that are far too revealing. The Transportation Security Administration says the scanners will be gone by June. The TSA says it yanked them because the company that makes them can't seem to come up with the software fix for the problem. Safety administrators say that they'll keep other airport scanners which produce a generic outline of a traveler's body as opposed to a naked image.
The Coast Guard works to find out why a tugboat sank in the Mississippi River, leaking fuel and oil. It happened around 5:30 this morning at mile marker 135 near Laplace. The boat was carrying 4,000 gallons of fuel and 100 gallons of oil. Some of it spilled into the river, but at this point investigators aren't sure how much. Luckily, crew members were able to escape before it sank.
The river can be very dangerous, so it's very good that nobody was injured in this, and we're extremely happy about the fact that they were able to get off without actually entering into the river.
Cleanup and pollution response teams have started efforts to minimize the environmental impact. The cause of the sinking is still under investigation.
The Rex organization files suit against the California Liquor Company.
While Rex leaders say the company is trying to rip off a New Orleans tradition.
And tonight we're watching the first week of parades. Looking good. No rain. Hail. No, not in Debian. We have that Weather Authority forecast coming up.
Carolyn Schofield previews Fox 8 News at 10.
Within an hour of Ray Nagin's indictment, word reached the international community through news organizations like the BBC. The former mayor gained an audience around the world in the days after Hurricane Katrina, and some saw him as a champion for the devastated city. Now they're seeing another side.
To the naysayers, this is one kind of mark in their column. But at the same time, we're going to turn around and say, forget about it. Nobody's going to care in 3 weeks. It's going to be Super Bowl, Carnival, Carnival, Super Bowl. It's all anybody's going to want to hear about.
Now, coming up at 10, we'll take a look at the media coverage around the country and the world and talk about how today's indictment could reflect on the city's image just as it's preparing to host the Super Bowl. That's coming up new at 10.
Now, your most accurate forecast with Chief Meteorologist Bob Breck.
Only when you've been in the deepest, darkest valley can you appreciate how glorious it is on the mountaintop. That's paraphrasing somebody from my past, but let me tell you, we were in the deepest, darkest valley early this week with no sun. Well, did you not appreciate 2 days in a row now with no clouds? Well, a few folks did have clouds, mainly south of Callender Field, down over Port Sulphur into Boothville, over, say, at Port Fourchon and Grand Isle. That was only early in the day. That got out of here because we have the flow coming from the north, pushing most of the clouds. In fact, all the way, the cold air goes down to the Yucatan. Kind of a fascinating satellite picture when you get the cold air bubbling clouds up, not the cold air, but as that cold air passes over the warmer water over the southern Gulf, it bubbles up these clouds and kind of a neat appearance. I like to show you cloud pictures because sometimes they show you more than clouds. In fact, you see the clouds marching, they're moving up here, but this line is not. That's the leftover snow on the ground across Illinois. None in Indiana or Ohio, Kentucky. Whoa, what do we have here? Snowstorm that came by the other day? Yes, left some snow from Knoxville on across the mountains of Virginia. And if you look closely here across northern Alabama, yeah, do you see it? They did get snow, but boy, it went away in a hurry. And again, we have been in a valley this week. Started out on Sunday with 77, but whoop, whoop. And now we're starting to rise back up, but this rise has been painfully slow. We should get back above our historical average of 62 tomorrow. Might even be there on Sunday. This weekend looks terrific. And a good news for the parade of the quarter tomorrow night, the Croix de Vue. Hail, Croix de Vue! We have no rain, clear skies, temperatures in the 50s. Not bad. Sunday's parades. Rascals, Slidelians. Oh, boy, if we could bottle this for the big parades, it'd be great. This is going to be a nice weekend. And it's warming up. The next 7 days look to be dry. Now, next week we'll get colder, but the core of the cold stays to our north. The reason we're dry is we got rid of the southwest flow here. Hints that it's trying to come back, but don't get nervous there, gang, because that flow can't come our way. We have a dip coming. You see it here? Started up there. Here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. This is going to be moving down. Luckily for us, it's not going to keep diving into the Gulf. It's going to come down and then go. This is where winter is going to be for the next, say, 5 to 7 days. It's going to really get, well, they're not there yet, but it's going to get there. And you can see how that push is coming out of Canada into the plains tonight. Not enough moisture there, though. They could use some snow. That's the drought area, but they have been avoiding the big snows and the big rainstorms. So even though the south has gotten a lot of rain, much of the areas up north have not. We're in the 40s here. In fact, most of the country is above freezing. It's January. You should see a lot of spots that are either 0 or below. You don't see that over the United States. Got to go up into Canada, and here's where the 20s and 30s and 40 belows have been sitting all winter. We haven't had the dip in the jet stream since December come down over the east. That's going to happen this weekend. So these single-digit numbers are going to be pouring over the Great Lakes, which, for the most part, are ice free. So there's going to be some serious snowstorms up farther to the north. High pressure over us now. That's going to glide away, but the ridge is going to stay back over us, keeping the Gulf blocked. No Gulf moisture is going to be feeding back. Now here comes, you see it way up here? Here comes that next front. Not going to be here. This is now Sunday morning. We still have a light northeast wind, plenty of sunshine, and the temperatures are going to be getting a little milder. But the front rumbles and stumbles down, and it will sweep onto us sometime. This is early Monday morning. Monday afternoon, you'll feel the cool down, and it will get chilly for next week. 55 was our 55. Whew. Actually, it felt pretty good later on this afternoon, but it was cold this morning with many spots near freezing on the North Shore, some 30s south. Actually, the readings on the South Shore, like at Kellner Field, already down to 39, 38 over in Slidell, 37 Bogalusa. There's going to be some spots away from the lake that's going to see, I think, widespread frost tonight because we don't have a lot of wind. Look at all the zeros showing up. And there's nary a lake effect. We have the waves out over the Gulf, 4 to 6 feet. They've come down some. They'll come down even more tomorrow. It's a beautiful night over the Superdome. We have the barometer that's falling now. No winds out in Kenner. And temperatures are in the 40s, some spots in the 30s. Tonight, there could be some frost, mainly north. Could even be some south. Light freeze in a couple of spots far north. Said that last night, we stayed above, but we'll give it another. A chilly start tomorrow, rapid warm up all day sunshine. Ought to get back up into the 60s, and that should stay around on Sunday. 2 picture-perfect days. Monday, that front comes. It might get up to 60, but then we're going to fall down. Notice we do have freezing temperatures on the North Shore next week, mainly in the 50s, before we warm up, and there's no rain until next Friday. The rain forecast settles down finally. That water temperature keep coming down too, and you can see the winds. I think this weekend you could even get an offshore trip. Your Firestone weather phone forecast at 833-0000. And of course, I warn you, not warn you, but advise you to download our free Fox 8 weather app. I do warn you. You ought to have it. Keep up with the weather, especially when the parade's coming. You can track the rain yourself. Mm-hmm. But no rain this weekend.
That's wonderful. I think some pent-up demand might exist.
Yeah, for me. I'm pent up, and I'm demanding.
Have no doubt. All right.
You have
Thanks,
no
Bob.
doubt.
The Rex organization once again goes after an alleged case of trademark infringement. Rex filed suit in federal court against the California-based liquor distributor King Rex Spirits Incorporated. It's a company that produces and markets vodka, rum, and bourbon under the name King Rex. The suit claims the company's packaging, marketing, and promotion use many symbols and descriptions that make reference to the Rex Parade organization. The lawsuit cites the company's use of the Monarch of Merriment and the King of Carnival in particular, which Rex says are 2 of its most well-established and publicly recognized monikers. Rex the New Orleans Rex wants damages and an order that protects its symbols.
Reparations for the Super Bowl are not limited to excitement on the streets. As proof, just look up.
We're wrapping all the way around the Superdome. We've got our guys going up right now onto 1555 Poydras, and they're putting a large graphic up that's going to be roughly 150 feet by 60 feet.
That's Arthur Boisfontaine, the owner of a company called Crystal Clear Imaging. He's mapping out the strategy for turning high-rises into Super Bowl memorabilia. Over 1,100 panels are being installed around the dome, and the Hyatt will have a gigantic image of the Lombardi Trophy.